Right, good afternoon, sorry, still good morning. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to another session of the extended essay process. Today we have Giulia, who's going to be presenting a topic based on world studies, which will be her extended essay, and she'll explain that hopefully. On our panel today we have, Roberto, you all know him, aware. We also have Victor, once again, and we also have Ms. Kale, who's the biology teacher. So we would like to welcome Giulia to the process, and what was it I was going to say? Right, and finally, what will happen with the process is the panelists will ask relevant questions at the end of the session, and then after that we can open it up to the general audience for any feedback that you have. Okay? So can we all please welcome Giulia?
Hello everyone, welcome. Thank you for attending my presentation. As Ms. Katrina said, I'm Giulia and I'll be presenting my paper essay on my extended essay. So, first of all, the subject area, like Ms. Katrina said, that I chose to go with was world studies, mainly because it entails interdisciplinary research, meaning that it's not just an essay on math, or just an essay on English, or just an essay on history. It's an essay where you can mix different kinds of disciplines. And I'll get into this a little bit later, but I had a lot of trouble choosing what area I wanted to go into. So this was kind of the perfect fit for me in a way, because there's, like I said, interdisciplinary research that goes into this. So my topic of choice was environmental sustainability in fashion, which is, I kind of got the best of both worlds, if you will, because I mixed something that I like, which is fashion, with environmental sustainability, which is a subtopic of world studies. So, the research question I came up with after many other research questions was finally, to what extent has the environmental sustainability movement impacted the fashion industry in the last decade? So, prior to this research question, I was actually in a more, I wanted to do something about fashion and talking about, to be honest, I don't even remember what I wanted before this, but it was something with economics and business and fashion, and I don't take either of those in the IB, nor do I plan on taking those, so it was a bit messy for me. And then once I found world studies finally, I wanted to compare cultures within fashion. So I remember one of my research questions prior to this was how the European fashion industry has impacted the Brazilian fashion industry, which is actually one of the suggestions that World Studies makes, is if you want to make a comparison between a global phenomenon and a local phenomenon, so that's kind of what I wanted to do. But I found really quickly that that was very, very, very hard to measure, the impact of one industry on another. So finally, I arrived at this research question, which I thought was very fitting and actually ended up being very interesting to look into. So the thesis of my paper is that in the last decade has been the most remarkable in terms of sustainable clothing, as the biggest changes were made and the awareness of the problem has spread. So, like I said, in the last 10 years or so, the awareness of this problem has been raised, that the fashion industry has become a very impactful industry, as it's always been since the growth of it, but it's actually had it's had a huge effect on worldly matters such as pollution and labor and a lot of things that I'll get into in a little bit, but that the last decade has been the most remarkable in terms of that. So the research methods I looked into firstly was statistics, because in order to evaluate how impactful an industry is, you need to know statistics, you need to know the measurements, you need to know the amounts and how the numbers, right? So just how impactful is it? So secondly, I think it's pretty much common knowledge that the fashion industry has a lot of press and journalism and things like that that go into it. So a lot of magazine and newspaper articles were very, very useful in my research on different people, such as Susie Menkes, that was one of the key people that started the fashion sustainability movement within fashion. So this was pretty important. Also, books were used. Surveys were conducted in my first, which it's a bit messy. My process was very messy, so I'll get into that a little bit later. But surveys were used in the first one, and a new survey will be implemented for this essay in a little bit. So scholarly articles on just sustainability, just so I could get a basis of a knowledge on as to what is sustainability, what is fashion in sustainability. So that was very important. And also movies, a movie called, a documentary actually called The True Cost, which talks exactly about this. So the structure, your basic extended essay structure, starting with the abstract, table of contents. And then what I decided to do was, firstly, I asked myself, what is the fashion industry? What entails it? How did it start? You know, because if you think about clothing, it started as something that, you know, in prehistoric times, people just used to cover their bodies just so we wouldn't be cold. And how did this develop into such a huge industry that so many people are involved in? There are so many jobs. There are so many. It's huge, right? So first off, I wanted to give an overview of the fashion industry and a little bit of the history as to how it became what it is today and how it used to be before and how it is currently. And the changes that have been made in the last decade within the current fashion industry as to how, in regards to sustainability and how that's achieved. So after that, the negative impacts that the industry brings, because with this essay, I felt that it's very easy to get lost within fashion, especially within my research. It's very easy to go into a fashion paper and have it be very frivolous, very superficial, very just, you know, just about the dress or just about the clothes and just about the really nice side of the industry and how beautiful it is and how all the clothes are being made and the designers. And I wanted to take that and I wanted to, you know, make it matter somehow. Like I feel like sometimes when people talk about the industry, it's very superficial. It's very just about the glitz and the glam and the, you know, the outside part of it. But no one really talks about the impacts. Prior to this, I didn't even know the impacts that went into it. So I really wanted to investigate that. So the negative impacts that it brings. Then after that, what is being done in regards to the impact? So new companies that have arisen, new brands that have arisen, that have helped this start, you know, this movement. That the sustainability movement has been around since the end of the last century, but really about fashion, something is only really being done within the last 10 years. And then towards the end, I kind of reached the conclusion that it's gonna be very hard to implement change within this industry. And Ms. Katrina actually helped me kind of see this, because I was, while writing my paper, I thought, well, if we just start a bunch of companies that are just gonna, you know, start making sustainable clothing, or if we just rebel and stop buying in mass clothing stores like Forever 21 or H&M or Zara, those big companies, then if we can, you know, we can speak our voice and everything will be, you know, fine. But that's not the reality, because if we stop buying from these stores, what happens to the people in, for example, Bangladesh? Their economy is based on this, or a large part of it is based on, you know, making clothing and making things like that, in a lot of Southern Asian countries as well. So the reality is that it's going to be very hard to implement a solution that's going to help address all the different issues and all the different effects that the industry has. So it's kind of what I like to call a double-sided conclusion, because there's no real right way to go, you know, there's two sides. So my findings with this, that I've already, you know, touched on this a little bit, was that the fashion industry is the second most responsible industry for pollution, which was a huge shock to me, because I feel like when we think of pollution, we think of cars, and we think of buildings and factories and things like that, but we never think of the industry. We never look at ourselves and we think, oh, what I'm wearing has polluted so much. Because the reality is that the amount of chemicals and pesticides that are used to, you know, grow the cotton that makes our fabric, or the amount of transport that it takes to get your clothes from one country to the other, or, you know, we never really take these things into account, or at least I didn't. So this was a really, really big, and I think the most interesting thing that I found within my process. So secondly is that the world is now geared towards fast fashion, which is a term that I came across a lot, which, like I said, is basically just where we buy a bunch of our clothes at, like I said, Forever 21, H&M, C&A, Hannen, Zara, all these places. Why? Because it's affordable clothing, it's trendy clothing, there's no commitment. We don't have to go and buying something and investing a huge amount of money into something we're going to wear until we grow out of it. We just buy what we like, and if we don't like it, it's not going to be intact really in a couple days. So, you know, but that the world, this is what the fashion industry is kind of gearing towards. And with this trendy fashion, I actually came to find that before, you know, when the industry started, there used to be really only 2 seasons for fashion, and that was spring and summer and fall and winter. And that was when clothes are, you know, the clothing's really changed and the new trends were made. But the reality is that now there are about 52 seasons. There's basically a season for every single week of the year, which is mind-blowing really, because then you find yourself wanting to, or at least feeling like you have to buy so much more because these clothes are being put out. So you can see how that can be wasteful and impactful on the environment. So yeah, like I said, the consequences this brings are massive. Because of the huge demand of clothing that has to be made, the workers are being extremely underpaid, because with that amount of clothing, you can't make it expensive, you know, imagine that. We can't actually pay these workers what they're, you know, supposed to be paid, because they get paid, you know, less than $4 a day. I mean, it's ridiculous. So that's a huge consequence that it brings. Pollution, like I said, the pesticides that go into growing cotton, not naturally, but just very quickly, so that, you know, because the demand is very large, which also brings us to scarcity of products. We're using up so much because of this constant need to make new clothing. Animal mistreatment, not simply in, you know, fur clothing or things like that. That has been around for a long time, but animals that are used as resources to make clothes, such as sheep for wool, or silkworms, for example. They're not letting their process be natural. We're not taking the silk out of these worms naturally. We're cooking them, and we're making these processes so accelerated, just so that we can get these clothes out as soon as possible, right? Because of the seasons, like I mentioned. So, and another thing, I went into doing this essay thinking, okay, all right, I'm going to come to a conclusion. Like I said, we're just going to stop buying clothes from these stores, and we're just going to implement new laws, or maybe implement new. It's not that simple, and that's what I came to find. That I think a lot of people, that happened with a lot of people in their essays. You go in thinking something, and you go in thinking that you're going to have a certain outcome, when really it's completely different, which I found was a really rewarding part of the process. So, my biggest obstacles. Well, I'm very indecisive. I started telling Miss Katrina, Miss, you know, I really like English, but I also really like art, but I don't really take art, and it was a mess. It was chaos, and I couldn't figure it out. I passed all the deadlines where we were supposed to turn in topics, because I said, how am I going to turn something in that I'm not passionate about? I don't do that. I don't work with things that I'm not passionate about. So to find something that I genuinely have an interest in or might pursue, that was really, really, really difficult for me. And then when I finally found it, and I wrote an essay on it, I figured out I didn't actually have a subject area that my essay went into. So I had to write a completely new essay, which was not a very enjoyable process. So that was really, really difficult. Also finding a measurable / attainable research question, which I talked about in the beginning. It was really difficult for me to come up, because what I realized was that the research questions I was making were more of curiosities that I had about the industry, and not things that I could actually measure, and not things that were genuinely attainable for me to cover in 4,000 words, or even in an essay at all, especially with the resources that I had as well. And like I said, finding a subject area, which is why when I found world studies, it was a blessing, because it's a very interdisciplinary research, so I could kind of, you know, and also because, I lost my train. Okay. Advice. Okay, so I actually don't see many diploma students in here, so I don't know how useful this will be. This is for you and you alone. So no, but this is really important. I've actually put a lot of thought into this, because I felt that last year when I was attending the Vivo States, the advice was pretty repetitive in terms of don't procrastinate, start early. Like that's useful for any assignment you have in the IB. Don't procrastinate on your IAs. You're gonna see it. Everyone's gonna procrastinate on the IA. That's not useful. I'm gonna tell you, you're gonna procrastinate. Okay, it's a natural part of it. But like I think Bruna mentioned this, you're going to do it, but make sure that you. This gonna sound really bad, okay? But like that you know how to do it, okay? You know your deadlines, you know how to. It's just I'm just being realistic. You're gonna do it, but just know that in the end it will be okay. And the sooner you start, let me go through the list. So start thinking about your topic now. I know I kind of started thinking about it in the Google Says, but then some months passed and you think about other things and you have so many things to do that you're like, whatever, I'll think about it when it comes around. And then it comes around and you're not going to have time to think about it. So start thinking about it now. I'm serious, guys. Start thinking about it now. So make sure, again, you read through, okay, so if you think, okay, I really like history. You print that subject area rubric and you read it and you make sure that you know what you're getting into, because otherwise it's going to be a mess and you're not going to know what you're doing. Yeah, so also, like I said, there are not many diploma students from the year ones, but I know that there are so many of you. Like, we're only what, 12? Yeah, we're 11. You guys are like 23. You guys are a huge group. So if you know what you want to do, claim your supervisor. Like, come up to them and you're like, because otherwise, I'm telling you, you guys are not going to have enough people. Also, this is really important, and I was actually thinking about this, and if I could do it over, this is something that I would do. The sooner you find out your topic, like I said, the better. Why? Because the IB really values when you can get your own data, when you don't just go, like, on Google and you say, oh, this professor said this, so I'm going to take that into account. No. Go in and do your own research. Do surveys at the mall. Send out questionnaires in school. That is really important. That really, really, really makes your paper more credible. So if I could, I would, assign my topic sooner. Therefore, I would have more time to research and have my own primary data for my essay. And also, like I said, I feel silly saying this because not everyone in here is going to do the extended essay, but for you two, it's really an enjoyable process. Like, if you don't get stressed and make mistakes, really, it's kind of cool. Like, I think, it's true, like, I think Carol was mentioning this morning. It's your own kind of mark that you get to make on the IB, It's your own project, it's your own, like, you can choose any topic under the sun. So if you choose a cool topic, it's really interesting to learn about it. When people ask me about it, I feel really proud that I know about everything that I know, Like, it's really, it's true, and it really is. It was, somewhat enjoyable process. I guess the outcome is pretty enjoyable, to have an essay, to have it done, to know everything that I know. Don't just think about it as, okay, I have to write 4,000 words to do the IB. Think, no, I'm going to research about something that's really cool, and then I'm going to learn a lot about. And like I said, not everyone does the diploma. Only the diploma students are required to do this. So don't take this as, it's one more responsibility. Take it as, no, this is an opportunity that I have, as a diploma student. It's a really cool responsibility to have. So now I'd like to open up to any questions or suggestions.
Much as a supervisor, but I am not going to. I'm going to leave that to the panel. Who would like to go first to give some feedback?
Well, so I have a question. So you talked about how your question changed, or your topic. Was your previous question related to fashion and sustainability, and were you able to use any of your, had you written any, or do you have research that you kind of switch to this topic, or did you completely start new?
Yeah. Well, okay. So what happened? That's actually a really good question. So I hadn't touched on sustainability at all, which is what I said. That's why I thought it was kind of superficial, a bit frivolous, and I didn't really enjoy that at all. So in the sustainability aspect, no. So more of my investigation, I had to redo completely. But for example, my introduction, my first paragraph, I think, where it talks about fashion in the 19th century and a bit of the overview and the history about fashion, that was already in my previous essay that I took from that because I figured I would have to look into the industry regardless. But in terms of sustainability and the actual content of my essay, I had to restart it, do it completely.
Okay.
Okay. So first of all, I really enjoyed your essay. Like, I really think it's outrageous how you and Carl can write essays in such a simply concise manner that actually delivers the knowledge you have. But for me, I really have difficulty like trying to explain myself. I would like to give just some suggestions. This is a really small suggestion. As a start, one of the criteria for the extended essay is the format?
Formal presentation.
The presentation. And it states in the criteria that you have to put numbers on each page. So, I mean, just little things. I saw your essay, your table of contents. It's actually moved up to the first page. It actually should be on the second page. So you should have like a cover page and then the table of content.
Yeah.
I think that was an issue with the document. Like.
Yeah, no, it's because since now we have to do the Arial font for the extended essay, when I changed it to Arial, it changed everything, but okay.
You see, your abstract was a double space, and it's for MLA, it's I think everything should be double spaced. And your citations, when you cite a quote or any information, you put it in your parenthesis. It's outside the full stop. So if you're citing, I don't know explain this, but
outside the full stop.
you put it. What you did is that you put the citation outside the full stop, but in reality, at least in my knowledge, correct me if I'm wrong, it should be inside the sentence. So you quoted Bruna says, I really like pancakes, and like you say, for example, your sentence says, Giulia said, and you quote, I really like pancakes, and then you have the quotation, and then the full stop. What you did is that you put the citation, you put the citation outside the full stop.
So, citation, the quote or the parentheses?
The parentheses, they coloca ela fora do sentence.
Okay, so I end the sentence with a period and then put the parentheses.
No, that's what
That's
you did.
what I did. That's not
Exactly. Should probably try to do this.
Okay. Is that it?
Yeah,
Sorry.
okay. Well, my question is about, first of all, I love the theme. It was really nice. My question was, in your paper you cite 2006 as a marking point, and also monkeys, Yankees.
Yeah.
But I didn't understand how she was a mark for you to differentiate what happened to the fashion industry after her.
Okay, well, so Susie Menkes is actually the editor of American Vogue, so I felt that she was pretty notable just as a human being. And it was in 2006 that she made a speech basically spreading awareness to this problem. So that's where I thought that was kind of a marking point for this, for this movement that I kind of named, which is the environmental sustainability movement in fashion. So that's why I thought that 2006, and also because I felt it would be more attainable / measurable if I got the last decade rather than just throwing it out there, the sustainability movement. So, yeah. But I will specify that.
Any other feedback? Sorry.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I didn't know if we were supposed to like go through our whole
Yes,
thing
go
or-
through your
okay.
Go ahead.
Well, so I was curious how you decided sort of like what to measure about sustainability. So you said like you're measuring the effect of like the sustainability movement on fashion. And so how did you pick what to measure? And sort of what was your, before and after, comparing the effects of like how did you measure the industry before and after? I was just kind of curious how you decided.
Well, I think in terms of measuring the effects, I just pretty much, I guess, researched the impacts that the industry can have in general, meaning pollution and all the things that I've already talked about. So I think just how much of this, or so how much of the pollution, for example, how much of the pollution is the industry responsible for? So just statistics and just things like that. I measured. I measured using mainly statistics, and then I just, in terms of before, I kind of just gave more of an overview of the history of fashion. So because before it was more of custom-made things and things were made at home, and it was more of farm-grown things, and everything was more natural and slow. And after only the really noble people got this, so it wasn't for everyone. And now where fashion is made so much more affordable, things have to be mass-produced and made so quickly. that there was a really big change in that. So I guess I just measured before, how fashion used to be before, and then with, you know, industrialization and things like that, how it changed.
So it's kind of like the change in the structure of the
Right,
fashion industry.
exactly.
Okay. And then let's see. So yeah, I was curious too, because I thought it was interesting at one point. So you kind of said like these are things that the fashion industry is doing. People who are trying to change sustainability. And then you made a comment that was something about like, are people willing to make these choices to actually bring about like even greater change within the industry? And so I was curious because you mentioned that you were thinking about, in the presentation you mentioned you were thinking about doing surveys.
Yeah.
Will you still have time to do that? And yeah, do you have any ideas for
Right, so I've actually already thought about the survey questions actually as I was reviewing and checking for corrections. I'm not sure if you remember, but there's a part where I talk about how much, basically how many people buy from mass-produced companies and from, you know, like I meant, you know, normal brands like H&M Fashion or Forever 21, things like that. So I was thinking of conducting a survey because the essay is due at the end of the month, so, you know, I figured I would take this time for corrections and things like that. So I actually thought of the survey a bit late, but I already have questions in mind that I would ask and send out to, you know, school and things and other people and things like that. So I was thinking of just measuring how many people do buy from these companies and how many people offer the choice to buy from a sustainable company would do so. So just to get kind of the social response of people.
Yeah, no, I think when you mentioned that, I thought that would be really interesting to actually see what are people's buying practices and would they change.
Yeah.
And one of the sources that I recommended is this article about, does sustainability actually promote people to want to buy those clothes or whatever? Like that was sort of interesting. So yeah, I think I also really liked kind of how many things are involved here, and that sometimes it's difficult because there are kind of so many there's so many things to measure with sustainability. There's all these kind of intertwined factors, and you know, you do a nice job of kind of looking at how all of these things are kind of intertwined. And the thing that I would suggest too is like making sure that each piece kind of ties back to your original research question. So everything in there is really interesting. I would just make sure that you tie in those pieces and kind of bring them together and say like, because there are things that are really interesting, and my question is, do they also, like, so I would just kind of go through and say, is this just really fascinating, but how could I tie it into that question? I think that would kind of give it a little more focus of, you know, tying it all together. Oh, and then my last thing would be, if you could just provide some more details about like the sustainability movement. So if your question is, does the movement have an effect on fashion? Just a little bit more about what the movement actually is. But yeah, it was fun for me to read. I don't know a ton about fashion. I mean, I know some about sustainability. So yeah, it was interesting to kind of find out some connections there.
Thank you. Yes.
I actually have a suggestion that I just remembered. You don't. I can give this to you afterwards. It's like
Yeah.
So while I was reading your essay, you talk about how there's actually 52 weeks of like new fashion. I don't call what the right term, but I really think there's again, it's a suggestion. You could apply economic theory to it because in my view. I mean, it's all subjects right together. So
you're right.
so like in my perception, there's first of all like a surplus of clothes. You can talk about like okay, you don't know about a lot about economics, but you can touch upon those. In addition, when you talk about fox skin and clothes made out of that, so for example, if a lot of people don't know, consumers don't know where how are the clothes they're buying being produced, right? So there's again economic concept of that Kyle talks about on his essay, which is information asymmetry. So that essentially we consumers are not really don't have the information needed to make a right environmental decision on which clothes we buy. And also, since you mentioned pollution and all of that, there's negative externalities of production, which again, economic theory, if you need help, you can just like pick it. Yeah, that's it.
There's one more suggestion. Let's not get excited. Thank you.
So when you talk about sustainability, you focused on the production part. So I like when you used the chart saying how they used cotton and how the cotton affected the environment, and then the mass production that also really made a huge impact with pollution. But there are other aspects also that could be cited, which is the advertisement and consumption. You said about consumption. It's talking about conscious consumption. So when you cite, for example, the fabrics or the industries in Bangladesh that's using slavery, how did that affect that brand, for example? You can cite a specific brand that was out in the news, like Zara. Okay, so once that came out in the news, how did that affect the consumption? Did people change their minds? That's one of the questions, right? So, is those information really making a difference in consumption for the people? And the advertisement also saying it's a green brand also helps people consume more, and this mass consumption, is it good for the environment? My additional source would be a small documentary. It's probably 25-minute long. It's called The Story of Stuff. It talks about stuff in general, but it's something that you have it in your paper. It's from the production chain to the transportation to get to the consumer. But that's for anything in general, not just for fashion. That would be my additional source. And congratulations.
Thank you.
So, thank you so much, Carl.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, have you seen the John Oliver piece on fashion? Did you watch that part of this? Because that's an additional source, and I remember watching that a long time ago, but that has a lot of specific examples on like the specific brands, and it talks about subcontracting, like with how it leads to slavery and how they're like kind of like blaming it on like subcontracts, like how they're not actually aware of this. So yeah, John Oliver last week tonight they have a piece on fashion, which I think.
Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to say thank you to all of you for being here, but especially to you, Giulia. I have to say, as your supervisor and yours, and many of you in here, I had to say you were the most impassioned one I saw. You actually believed what you were saying when you stood there, which I thought was quite impressive. And you have come a very long way with this. It was very impressive, eloquently delivered. So I want to wish you the best of luck. If you were to implement these changes again, we're looking at an excellent essay. So well done to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Once again, we will be breaking for